Hello, everyone. Welcome to Real Guitar Live. I'm Tomas, your host for today, and I'm hopefully going to answer all your guitar-related questions, at least give it a darn good try. For those of you who are new, welcome. Good to have you here. Feel free to ask a question anytime in the chat. I'm going to start with some pre-submitted questions, and then I'm going to go through the chat. Please write the word question in front. My eyesight's not that great, and I'm glancing down a lot of comments. I can't tell which are questions and which are just comments. But if you write question, I'll focus on that and get your question answered. At the end, I'm going to do a drawing like we do every month. And this is for students of my Real Guitar Success membership. They get a practice session each weekday, and all they have to do is spend 10 minutes on it, save it if they want for later. And at the end, they're entered into a drawing if they complete all 20 of the practice sessions. And it's a $50 Amazon gift card, in case you're wondering. Okay, so that's kind of the admin stuff out of the way. Let's get started with some of the questions. And by the way, hi, Shulamit and Mark. Good to have you here. And I look forward to hearing some great questions from you guys. Let me start with a question I have that I want to spend a little time on, actually. This is by Shulamit. Could you please explain chord nomenclature? So she's talking about extended chords in particular, not just basic triads or simple chords. And she particularly wants to know the difference between a Cadd9 and just a C9. And when you write Cadd9, it's C with add and 9. And C9 is just the letter C and 9. They are two different chords. So I'm going to back up a little bit and talk about, first of all, triads. This is a review, hopefully, for everybody. I'm not going to go into enough depth to be considered a real theory lesson, but I will put links to more in-depth information in the notes, which will come out in a few days. So let me start with my cool slide. By the way, this is a new technology for me. I hope it looks like it's working. As far as I can tell, everybody can see. This is a Google slide, and I just found out that I can use these. This is the basic structure of a simple chord, what we call triads in music. Triads just means 3 notes. A chord is 3 notes. 2 notes technically are not considered a chord. 3 notes are a chord. And the 3 notes can help you determine if it's a major chord, a minor chord, a diminished chord, or augmented. So when you're talking about triads, those are the only 4 options, actually. No, that's not true. You could have suspended chords too. Okay, we'll mention that at the end. If I forget, you guys remind me. Mention suspended chords. I want to talk about that. So I want to show you the basic triad and use the terminology I'm going to use for extended chords. Intervals. A basic triad is made of 3 notes, but it's the space between the notes that tells your ear this is a chord and what type of chord. So from the root note, the bottom note, the C, to the E is 2 steps. Each step, by the way, and most of you probably know this, on the guitar is 1 fret, 2 frets, actually. 1 fret is a half step, 2 frets are a whole step. So on the guitar, we're talking about 4 frets or 4 half steps is another way to say that. We're just going to call that a major third, okay? 2 steps for this conversation is going to be called a major third. I won't go into the theory of why. It's just called a major third for now. And 1.5 steps, in other words, 1/2 step smaller, is a minor third. So that's 3 half steps, same. We're going to call that a minor third. Major thirds and minor thirds we got now. If you stack a major third and then a minor third, you get a major chord. Basically, this would be the chord. Now you're probably saying, wow, that's got more than just 3 notes. Yes, some are duplicated. There's only 3 notes, but some are duplicated. I start with a C, E, G, and then I got another C there, and then another E. And that's the same with any chord. When you see 6 strings being played, if it's a basic triad, this is a G triad, by the way, it's just a G triad with some duplicate notes. So if it were a minor chord, or I should say, if the intervals were stacked in reverse, in other words, minor third and major third, then you got a minor chord. And this would be, well, we need C minor to be consistent here, right? C minor, I have to use a bar chord for C minor. Yes, there's 6 strings, duplicate notes again. And that difference that makes the minor sound in your ear is just simply that distance from the C to E flat to make it a minor third, and then E flat to G. By the way, we call the note on the bottom, or in general, the note that names the chord, the root note. These are root note of C, C minor, C major, C augmented, and so on. If you're curious, augmented would mean you take that top one and you basically make a major third and a major third one on top of each other. So a minor, or rather augmented, is the reverse, a minor third and a minor third stacked on top of each other. Not as common as major and minor chords. So that's the foundation that we're building on. Extended chords. Oh, I know what I want to do. I want to go to my next slide. That's the cool thing about slides. I can just stack them up. So here's all the intervals, first of all, because it'll help to refer to this as I'm talking. So major and minor third, we already talked about that, but there's a whole bunch of other intervals, and I'm not worried about memorizing right now, but it'll help my discussion. Basically, at the fundamental level, extended chords are just adding additional intervals. So for an example, a C major chord, if we add another interval of a seventh, minor seventh, we'll say, first of all, that makes a C7 chord. So that would be this. Or this easy way to play a C7. So that is the notes C, E, G, like I showed you before, with a seventh interval from the C. That turns out to be a B flat note. So I'm going from the root note in terms of distance, interval. C to B flat is a seventh interval, a minor seventh. That's important. If it were a major seven, it'd be a half step bigger. Major seventh would make a C major seven chord. So if you want a C major seven chord, you basically take a C triad and add a major seventh interval. Sound like this. Now, there could be four notes there. I say could be, and I'll come back to that. Right? The C, E, G, plus that major seventh, B natural, by the way. You can just figure it out by counting up half steps if you wanted to, but I know the scale too. I know in the scale of C, the B natural is going to be a major seventh. If I flat it, it's going to be a minor seventh. These are things you get with experience. So, minor seventh is a minor chord with the minor seventh interval added. Minor seventh triad, add that minor seventh interval, B flat again, right? Same note as the C7, but now with a minor triad underneath. Okay. Oh, yeah, I played minor seven. Good. I did it right. Now, those are extended chords, right? When we get into seventh, those are considered extended chords. But Shulamith was asking about a ninth chord. C9 is basically a C7 with another note added. So we've got the C7, we'll say the four notes from C7, the triad plus that B flat, right? We're using the minor seven interval. We got to get a ninth. The ninth, the notes only go up to 8. 8 is an octave. So really 7 and 8 is a repeat. 9 would be one past the octave. So if you're talking the C chord, C9 would be that C7 chord plus an extra note. In the case of the C scale, that would be D. So I know it sounds, you could theoretically just call that C2, right? Because CD, that's 1 second away from C, but we call it C9. That would take a longer discussion I want to go into now. Take my word for it. C9 is a common chord. So on the surface, we've taken that C triad, added a 7 to it, and then we've gone beyond that and added another note, a D. So now we've got C9. I'll play C9 right here. Now, it sounds very spicy. When you get into extended chords, they sound more spicy. Unfortunately, it's not quite that simple. This is the basic idea, but in practice, once we get past the seventh, or even when you start adding seventh, sometimes you eliminate some notes. Well, I mean, you can imagine if you got a C13, you couldn't get all those notes on the guitar, right? But that's, even if you did, it would be too cluttered. So there's all kinds of rules for, and they're not really rules. I would call them more like guidelines for what notes you could eliminate. One of the common notes that's eliminated when you get past the triad is the fifth, because the third, you still need that to determine whether it's minor or major. So the fifth. So example, in the C triad, you just take that C, E, get rid of the G, add the seventh, B flat, and add the ninth, C9. So you still got 4 notes, and it still sounds like a C9. You didn't need the fifth to make it sound like a 9 chord. If you flatten that E, the second note, let me go back to my second here. There. So let's say you got a C minor triad, and you want a C minor 9, you flatten that E, it makes it an E flat. That gives you that minor third on the bottom, major third on top. Get rid of the G again. Same B flat, which makes the 7th, and same D, which makes the 9th, alias second, 9th. You've got a C minor 9 now. So they pretty well follow the pattern, but there are some little kinks. When you get past 9, there's other notes you can eliminate. You can, when you get up to 13, you can eliminate the 9 and still make it sound like a C13, that kind of thing. But I want to get to the C add 9. The C add 9 is a different chord than C9. C9, now that you understand that, a C add 9 is no 7th. If you get rid of that 7, see, if you want an extended chord, to make a C9, you need that B flat, which means C7, then add a D. Get rid of that 7th, and it sounds like basically a C triad with an extra D in there, kind of a suspended sound. We call it C add 9. Now, interestingly enough, as I mentioned, the 9 could be considered just a second, right? It comes after the C. If you add 8 more notes, it's a 9. But, you know, wherever you play it, how do you know if you added 8 notes or double that or not? They do sometimes call the C add 9, I'd say almost equally C add 2. I've had to decide in my younger days to just name it one thing. I usually use the terminology C add 9. It is the same as C add 2, exactly. And if you understand the theory, you can kind of see, yeah, 2 and 9 are the same note. No 7th. C add 9 is like a C9 without that 7th. Or you could say the C add 9 is the same as C9, but we add a B flat in there to make it C9. When you get past the 9, basically you follow the same formula. You just got to sometimes eliminate certain notes. Almost always you keep the 3rd in, but you can start, and the 7th, if you want something that sounds like a dominant chord, a C add 9 fills that function of the 5 chord in the key, you're going to want to keep the 7th in there. So, any questions about this so far? I realize this is not a thorough, in-depth theory lesson, but my hopes is that it's enough to kind of get you interested in different aspects and to know the questions to ask as well as what you want to learn more about. And that's where I've probably learned the most. I got a little bit of information and say, but there's like a hole here, or I'm not sure. And it would inspire me to learn more about it and made it more fun, kind of filled in some of the holes. I'll start looking at questions. Okay, this is good. I want to go right to Shulamit, who, even though it's not the first question asked, she's asking for more examples, basically. How about an F9? So we're going to take an F triad. Remember, we're going to stack the major third on top of the minor third. So this would be, I'm going to use this as an example. This would be F, A, and C. So I know from F to A is a major third, and C, F, A to C is a minor third. You could count half steps. I know this by memory. You will too someday if you don't already. So you've got your major triad now. F9, we're going to add a 7th to that in the key of F, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F. You need an E flat to make it a 7th interval. Now, I could say I counted up from F to E flat, and I know that's a minor 7th. We need a minor 7th interval. Let me go back to my intervals just for a second. I know that's a lot, but it helps me to refer to this chart. We need that minor seventh interval. See, that's 5 steps. I know I can easily go back. In other words, from F, go back 1 step to get a minor seventh interval. So I went back from F. E is only a half step. E to F is a half step. B to C, E to F, the rule of B to C, E to F. So I know I needed an E flat. That would give me the 7th. So now we got an F7, not add 7, because we got the 7th in there. It's an F7. And we've got still the 3rd in there and the 5th. Yeah, you could get rid of the 5th, by the way. It still sounds like F7, but keep the 3rd. Now, to get to 9, we add 1 note beyond F, 1 full step. So I know from F to G is a full step. We need a G in there. That makes it an F9. F, A, I need the 3rd. Let's get rid of the C, the 5th. Keep that E flat for the 7, and then go to the G. That would make it an F9 chord. Let's go on to the next chord she's asking about, D minor 7th. Now we need the D minor triad to start. So D, F, A. Again, I know that by heart. But you can figure it out very easily. Just get a major 3rd or 4 half steps, basically. A minor 3rd for a minor chord. 3 half steps. So I went from D to F. I know that's 3 half steps. F, A is a major 3rd, 4 half steps. I got a minor triad. And you can do this simply by counting from notes. Just count half steps. D, D sharp, E, that's 2 half steps. E sharp, no, that's F, right? E to F, that's another half step. Okay, minor 3rd. Now, to make it a minor 7, we need to add that 7th. Again, I'll go all the way up to an octave D and go back 1 step. That's the easiest way in my mind. 1 full step from D backwards is C. C, C sharp, D. Yeah, got it, right? So now we've got a minor triad with a C added, D minor 7. D, F, A, and add the 7th interval. That's from the D. C, D, F, A, C. Again, I could get rid of the A. I could keep it. I could get rid of it. It's still going to sound like D minor 7. Don't get rid of that D, F. Don't get rid of the 3rd. It wouldn't be, you couldn't tell if it's minor or major. It sounded like a kind of a nebulous chord. That's, by the way, what power chords are. You can't tell if they're minor or major, a power chord. Or even this is a power chord with 3 notes. It's the root of the chord, the 5th, and then the root. There's no 3rd, so you can't tell if it's a major or minor. You can't really hear if it's a major or minor chord. You can assume by, how I'm playing it and maybe what the rest of the band is playing, but the guitar doesn't tell you if it's major or minor. Okay, good question. I'm going to go to the pre-submitted questions, and if I see any more of the questions related to the chords, I'll get right back to that. I don't see any off the top of my head. No. Oh, I do want to mention suspended chords. Again, I can't, it would take an hour to really do it justice. We're going to do the basic surface level. Some of you will say, yeah, that's enough. I got that. Some of you say, yeah, that's old stuff. Some of you will say, whoa, there's a whole bunch more to learn there. Yes, there is then. Good. It's fine. Suspended chord, same triad. We'll start with that G that I have up there, the C chord, I'm sorry, C, E, G. Raise that E up, E to F, 1 half step, right? Let me see. No. Raise the 3rd up a half step. I'm playing I don't know an easy way to play a C suspended. I'll just do it. I have to do a bar chord. So here's a C chord bar. Excuse the bar chord. It's just I can't make it suspended without a bar, or easily anyway. To make it C suspended, I'm raising that E to F, right? E to F is that half step. And it sounds in our ear like the chord is suspended. It feels like it's not quite the chord that we're going to. And there's a resolution when I go make that F go down to the E. That's why they call it suspended. It's more accurate to call it suspended fourth because you can have a suspended 2 also. In other words, you take the root of the chord and add basically the D, C sharp, and I'm confusing myself. Let's stick with suspended 4. So with a D, I'd make a D triad, major triad. Add, instead of the middle note, which is an F sharp, add G instead, replacing it. That makes D suspended. There we go. And then resolve it back to D. That sound is very common and attractive. Has a tension to it. Your ears feel like it wants to move. The suspended second is where I lower the middle down 1 step. I'll say it that way. That's a better way to say it. I was trying to go for the root. That doesn't make sense. I still have the root in the chord, but I take the middle note. In this case, a C would go down to D, replace the E, and then back up to the note. So C, there. C, suspended 4, back to C, take the E down to D, replacing the E, sus2 or suspended 2. We abbreviate it sus. And then I go back to the E. Both have that sense of wanting to resolve. I'm more familiar with the 4, suspended 4. Maybe it's just more commonly used. But I think the sus2 is also an attractive sound chord. So that's my short spiel on suspended chords. Hopefully that at least piques some interest for some people. Okay, let me go back to what's the difference between a lick, a fill, and a solo? And I'm going to take this off so people don't think that this has anything to do with what I'm talking about. Well, a fill, a lick is a phrase of notes that that is something that you can kind of repeat or is repeated that sounds good. Usually I think of a lick as the same as a riff, if that helps anybody. And as a matter of fact, I've looked this up at one time because I didn't know what to call a riff or a lick, and this was years ago, and pretty much I see them going used in the same term. And on a practical level, this would be a lick. And it's usually single notes. That's not always the case. That's just how most people use the word lick. But you could easily do a lick like this. I would call that a riff. I guess I tend to reserve licks for single notes, but I'm not sure that's the way everybody thinks of it. So you can make up your own riffs, licks. You can copy. It's common for when you're learning lead guitar to listen to records and try and copy some of the licks. And then hopefully, if you keep at it, you kind of change them rhythmically or add a few notes on and make them your own instead of just sounding like somebody else over time. But in general, it's a tried and true method of kind of getting the basics of soloing. Learn riffs and licks, one and the same again. Learn scales, so you kind of see a framework that they fit in, and then practice like heck using them over chord changes to basically massage them to something that sounds more like your own style instead of just somebody else. She also asked what's a solo, and solo is usually considered an entire series of licks and notes played together, usually stuck into a framework of a song. So like there's a song, I'm singing a song, and then you play the chords, and the guitar player plays a variety of notes and licks together, hopefully that kind of crescendo, and then come down to a finish. You know, it feels like it goes somewhere, like a little story. And I would call that a solo. It doesn't have to be a guitar player, obviously. There's lots of sax players that are accomplished at doing soloing. Now, I want to mention, sometimes that to me gets confused with playing solo guitar. Solo guitar usually means, when it's phrased that way, you're playing a guitar where you're playing the melody and the chords together, either usually finger style, but it can be with a pick too, where you're playing the melody and the chords in the guitar, meaning it's one guitar solo. I don't know how solo got used for playing, improvisation, that's another word. And I find I've tried to use these words interchangeably on YouTube to see what people think. And it's kind of improvisation, solo, kind of used in the same fashion. Improv maybe has a little more general connotation, like you can be improving through a whole song. And you're basically, improv means you're not, it's not a set in stone song. You're making notes on the, on the fly. But usually solos are an improvisation. In other words, they're not, a lot of times they're improvisation. I shouldn't say always. I hear rock guitar players play pretty much the same solo every time on the record and live. So I can't say they're always improvisations, right? They improvise, came up with a solo they like, and kind of repeat it over and over. They don't want to take too many chances. Depending on the player, of course. And a fill. Now, a fill is used in a lot of situations. A fill doesn't have to be single notes or chords, but it usually means you have a phrase, it's a clear phrase in the song, and then there's a little connecting something in between the phrase to get to the next phrase. It could be chords, single notes. It can be a drum part. Often the drum is playing a standard beat, and that is the fill into the next phrase. Music is usually in some types of phrases, the most common being 8 bars long. And a fill would be stuck in between each 8-bar phrase. So I don't want to go 8 bars. Here's a fill. That little bass note run would be considered a fill going into the next phrase. Now, if I had another player with me, we could, I could be playing the chords and they could do a fill right, while I'm still playing the chords. So it's a little awkward playing solo and trying to show that. Let's go on to the next question. Are there any rules for making my own licks? For example, if a song in the key of A minor and the verse ends with an E minor chord and the chorus starts with a C chord, what should I play to make the transition? I think this could be helpful for some people, but I'm going to say I've never thought of it like that. And I don't know of any rules. I'm sure some more analytical type musicians could come up with some rules. I don't think anybody will say they're hard and fast rules, but some, kind of suggestions of what to use or things to help people learn how to do licks. I've never thought of it that way. I think of it more from what sounds good to me. And I certainly would try to stay in the same key, but I don't have a formula, so to speak, of any licks that I use between chords. My approach, and I know at least most of the musicians that I work with, their approach is to listen to other people, hear what sounds good, copy it, and then work it so it's not exactly the same, not at one time, but they use kind of licks they've heard from other people, integrate them into the vocabulary as they're soloing or playing. And then, over time, they kind of massage them until they don't sound the same, maybe even make variations of it and use them sort of like incorporating language and phrases into your speaking vocabulary. They do that in their musical vocabulary. I've never had anybody say to me, "Oh, I figure out these licks by this formula or these types of chords." Depending on your orientation, I will say this. My experience with a lot of students are a lot of adults in particular, not kids, adults, try to analyze and think music out. And from my experience, that is a backwards way of doing it. Music theory and formulas came from what was working and people liked, and musicians making theoretical language around it to basically teach this to other people. And I would say that with a certain word of caution, because sometimes I think it's more to talk about it and because they like thinking about it. Adults in general try to use thinking as a way to do something that doesn't necessarily work from a thinking perspective. And it's normal. I mean, this is not wrong. This is what's got us so far as being adults. It's what we use in work. We got us through school, in a lot of areas of our life. It just doesn't work well with music or with dance or with art, quite frankly. I found this out really clearly from taking salsa dance lessons. I tried to analyze the movements, remember each little thing, kind of think it out, and nobody wanted to dance with me. It's because it looked like I was thinking about it. Matter of fact, I remember early in my performing career, having a wonderful musician I really admire come up and saying to me, you know, your solos sound like you're playing basically scales and thinking out what to play instead of, you know, really playing from your heart and really feeling it and trying to express yourself. And I said, that's the error in trying to think out things, how they work musically, instead of playing it, hearing it, trying it again over and over, and then integrating it into, you know, what works for you, what expresses what you want to work. I think theory's okay, but make it as a side dish, not as the main way of approaching things. Make it as a complement to help you kind of stretch into trying different things. Ultimately, though, it's useless until you integrate it into your playing, into your expressiveness, how you use it. So, little speech there. I hope that inspired somebody. Now I got another question from Tammy. It's really hard. She's playing this basic exercise. I call it a finger developer. And it's the first one I teach students, the first exercise. It's a great warm-up. But it's, even though it looks very simple, I'm helping students train their fingers to get in the right place very slowly without having to think too hard. In other words, once you remember the exercises, there's not a lot to think about it. Just get your fingers in the right place, curled properly, getting good sounding notes, go as slow as you need to do that. Not about speed, really. That's why I call it finger developer. I used to call it speed developer because it actually does turn into faster when you get the notes right and they get to be a habit. But people got confused. They thought they should go fast. She's having a problem with stretching all the way over to the sixth string, right? Not here. That's the first string. Oh, no pinky. But stretching over, since her hands are small. And I get that. You know, I've done this so long, it didn't even occur to me, honestly, that would be hard for some people. But I do have to shift my hand. First of all, Tammy, I want to say, and this applies to everybody, when you're doing exercises, it's probably best in the beginning, if that's really hard, just go to the fifth string or even the fourth if you need to, and keep doing it. The important thing is to make it a habit. In other words, practice it every day, maybe even twice a day, but just for a little bit, like a couple minutes at a time, 3 minutes. And then over time, start adding the next string and then the next string. Matter of fact, what I would do is like I'd do the exercise and then later in the day I do it again, but I try adding the sixth string. Still hard, just come back. Then the next day I try it again and just keep kind of poking yourself over there and give it a shot. Believe me, one day you'll look back and go, oh, that used to be hard. A practical tip, by the way, is to do this. And again, it's something probably people have been, myself included, doing this for years, take for granted. You need to shift your hand up a little bit. In other words, you push it's from my elbow, I push my hand up a little bit to reach over. I can't keep my hand in the exact same place and just reach over like that because it flattens out right here and I start touching other strings. I don't want to do that. I push my hand up a little bit. Don't exaggerate because that could cause problems with your hand. A little bit so I can still get an angle there. And again, it's second nature after you do it for a long time, but that's the point of this exercise, is to work on getting the habit of getting your fingers in the right place in a way that's just repetitive and doesn't create a bunch of mental, oh, what note do I play now? All that kind of stuff. Just get that out of the way, learn the exercise and do it slowly, a little bit every day, maybe twice a day if you can muster up the it's more of a scheduling thing than time because I'm talking 2 or 3 minutes a day. So hope that helps you, Tammy, but I hope it helps everybody who might be having here's another example. This is a difficult exercise for a lot of people. I call it the spider. See, I played those 3 notes. Now I'm moving one finger over at a time, but the other 3 stay. It's difficult to get this finger over here and get this note to sound without these fingers touching it, doing that. So I don't want to make it look too easy because it was hard for me when I first learned it. This is a great exercise to just do on 2 strings to start. Maybe the highest 2 strings, I call the first and second string. And then go back. See, I'm moving one finger at a time. And then one finger over to the first string. And then add the third string, then the fourth, and over time, spread it out. You don't have to, it's not a black and white. I got the exercise, I don't got the exercise. Ease into it if that's what you need. If it's easy, that's fine too. But I would recommend err on the side of getting it right and doing only two or three strings, and then adding another string and then another string. Okay, let's move on to some more questions. I'm going to start from the top, and I'm looking for question. By the way, if you weren't here early on, I've asked that when you add a question, please start with the word question, because I'm going to have a hard time seeing it's a question, separating it from a comment. And, oh, I got this little thing right here. Because I know people are coming and going. I want to put this on the screen to help remind those people who are just like dropping in. Okay. Yeah, I see a lot of comments. And Mark is working on the spider walk. He seconds that's a great exercise. I think it's a wonderful exercise. It really helps to get your fingers working independently instead of all at once going from one string to another. And I always start beginners with the simplest version, right? Really, there's nothing wrong with simple. As a matter of fact, I'd rather simpler than they think they need, because I want them to focus on the technique and not on the exercise. Then I'll add the pinky, and I'll usually go up to the fifth string. That's the next one. The pinky's usually hard for beginners. I'll do the same exercise here. You can see I'm preparing for the spider walk. And get that finger down to where it's reasonably relaxed before you go on to the next exercise. Then I'll start adding the spider walk. And again, I just recently thought I'd rather see somebody do 2 or 3 strings at a time than try to do the whole thing and do it badly and get frustrated and think they can't do it. Thanks for chiming in, Mark. And I will put a link, by the way, to the spider walk in the show notes. So it'll take a day or two to get them out, but and I'll put a timestamp so you can refer it to this part of the video and to the lesson. So don't worry if you didn't get it from my showing it off. Question. I see one. Do you have a good way to learn a song's progression by ear? Perhaps try to match the sound on one string when the chord changes. This is Russ, by the way. Thank you, Russ. Excellent. Let me see. I'm thinking of 3 things. The first thing is more of a developmental thing. I really strongly recommend, I don't know where you are in the process of learning guitar, but I strongly recommend you learn basic common chord progressions. Because when you hear chord progressions, what you're hearing, a lot of it is the movement from the chord, not absolutely hearing a chord. In other words, somebody just play a C chord to play that. I'm not sure I could do that. But if you play a chord progression, I hear the motion or the distance between the chords, and I hear the pattern. Now, I immediately recognize that pattern. I can play that pattern. I got to get the first note. In other words, the key. That's not that hard. I'm going to go more common. More common is the F, the G. That's called a 1-6-4-5. Common chord progression. We call it sometimes the 50s rock ballad progression because it was used a lot in these kind of songs, doo-wop type thing. And so on. That's just one, by the way, and it's still used today, by the way, particularly when a pop song wants to give this kind of retro sound to it. They use that chord progression. And there are about a handful, I could make I could say 10. I would start with a handful of common progressions that you really will give you a lot of bang for the buck. And then you match that sound with songs. I know that's not a short-term solution, but it really gets you on a path that is very powerful. And the second benefit to that is it makes it a very good way to practice your chord changes because it's using chord changes that are commonly used very often. So you're practicing the movements that you're going to use a lot. The other thing, and as you alluded to, is I want to match the sound with the string. So I would start with, instead of playing the whole chord, I try and get the root note of the chords. Or you could say the bass note. Root note is just the chord that it's called. A C chord has the root of C. But bass line is basically, here's that bass line. I'm going for the bass, real bass. That was the bass line to that chord progression I just played. That's easier to hear than actually get the whole chord, because now you need to figure out what is a minor chord, major chord, get the root note, and that gives you a lot of information. What I usually do, if I can, is I'm going for the chord progression I hear, and then I go for the key that it's in. I find the key that it's in, I usually start with the low string, and I'll kind of just play up and down until I get a note that sounds right. I'll go all the way up and down because I don't want to take the first note that sounds right. A lot of them will sound terrible, but one note might sound good, but one might sound better. I won't go into the theory of that, but there is a theory of that certain notes in a key sound kind of like that key. But if you play a bunch of notes, one of them will sound more like the home. And that's, I would go, that sounds like the home note of the key. So I'm in the key of C. That's a C note. So I know I got the key of C. Those are the ways I go about it. I'll start with the chord progression. If I can hear a chord progression pattern, I won't try and play it first. I'm just going to listen. And that was, by the way, a mistake I made early on. I jumped right to the guitar and I start cluttering up the sound. I need to take a few moments to really listen to it and try and hear the bass note and hear the chord progression. And sometimes I'll start playing and I stop again. So I need to listen a little better, get clearer on what I'm hearing, get it clear in my mind. And I think a lot of people probably jump too fast to the guitar. I'm just assuming that someone like me when I was learning. And then my second go-to would be, if I get a chord progression that sounds right, I'll find the key that it's in. If I can't do that, then I'll go and try and find the bass notes for the chord progression that I hear. And I'm looking for a pattern. I keep looking for a pattern, because most songs have a pattern of some form or fashion in it. I'm looking for where I hear the patterns, and I'll hear a song through and hear the patterns first. Once I get the key and one of the patterns, it's a lot easier for me to hear other chord changes that work with that pattern. Good question. Thank you. Next question. I see question. By the way, Russ, I just noticed he mentioned it helps to know, once you're in the key, what chords are in that key. In other words, learn your keys and the chords that fall naturally in the key. A word for that is diatonic. So what that means is, like in the key of C, the C scale is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And you can build a chord off each of those notes from notes in that scale without adding or subtracting notes or altering them, sharp or flat. And each of those chords are going to be considered diatonic to that key. It'd be C, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, and then you start over a C chord. More theory. I'm 72. This is Teresa. And I played since 1963. Wow. Are there any tricks or techniques to speed up the process of callouses on your fingers? It's my 47th birthday of playing guitar and doing finger exercises. Happy 47th birthday, Teresa. There probably are, I'm sure on YouTube, they come up with some interesting tricks for getting calluses. I've read some stuff, putting crazy glue on your fingers, not to get calluses, but to make them less sensitive. That's not for me. I've heard some people, tapping their fingers. That doesn't seem common, but tapping constantly to try and develop calluses. I have one tried and true method that has worked for me and every student that I can think of, and that's to play every day, to play exercise every day. And if that doesn't work, do it twice a day. The problem that most students have is they let too much time lapse between doing their exercises and the calluses start going away. They don't completely go away, but they try to go back to normal. That's the nature of human anatomy. We try to get back to where we were mentally and physically. And when you practice every other day, you've already gone backwards, whether you realize it or not. But practicing every day will have other benefits too. It'll help you remember what you practiced the day before, what you did right and wrong, what you need to work on. Even 2 or 3 days, at least for me, maybe it's because I'm getting older. I can't always remember all the little details, but every day it's much easier. A little bit, 10 minutes a day. If you're really trying to build calluses, do 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes at night of just exercises. Hope that helps. Might not be what you want to hear. Believe me, if you do it, you'll be glad you did. Asia's asking, I want to buy my first guitar, but don't know what I should get. What do you recommend? So first of all, Asia, if you were my student, I'd have a bunch of questions for you. What style do you want to play? What's your previous experience? I don't know if you say it's your first guitar, but you've played before and you just don't have a guitar of your own. If you've played other people's guitar, are you going to be traveling? Do you want something that's more portable? Generally speaking, you're going to narrow it down to an electric guitar or acoustic guitar. And acoustic comes in 2 varieties, nylon and steel string. That's a simplification. There's 12-string guitars. There's, little guitars, bigger guitars. Okay. I guess maybe I'll just assume that you want an acoustic guitar, possibly a nylon string guitar. I think you would have told me if you wanted an electric guitar, but I don't know. Depends on the kind of music. If you're just listening to rock and that's really what you're intent on playing, you probably just go ahead and start an electric guitar. Never hurts to have an acoustic, but it's probably the easiest way. Acoustic guitar is the hardest on your fingers, but it's the most commonly used. It's a sound that we're all familiar with. Nylon string's easier on your fingers, but it's just not going to give you a sound that if you're listening to pop rock music that you're going to be used to. I would recommend probably getting either a regular size acoustic. For most people, I prefer a slightly smaller body. Sometimes they call them concert. There are 3/4 or 7/8 type guitars, slightly smaller body, easy to play around. This is a slightly smaller body. I think they call this a concert. There's a few terms in there that like auditorium and concert. I hear the auditorium slightly smaller than concert, but I hear them thrown around a lot. It's not that clear which is which. But as opposed to a jumbo, which is the same shape but bigger, or dreadnought, I can tell you that's distinct. That's a shape and it's kind of big. I like a little concert guitar. And then put very light strings on it so it's easier on your fingers. If you're okay with nylon strings, get a 7/8 or 3/4 guitar. Again, I see them kind of used interchangeably. Yamaha makes a good one, by the way, for practicing because the neck's smaller. Nylon strings, the full size, they're classical guitars, and the neck's very wide. It's hard to get your finger across. Probably you want a steel string, put light strings on it. If you're still hurting your fingers, put strings called silk and steel on it. They're kind of a hybrid between nylon and steel string, but it'll be easier on your fingers. And you can always change strings later on. So if your fingers get tough and you want regular steel, you just change strings. Get used to changing strings. Don't be shy. You're going to break them. You just need to be able to do that. Hope that helps. If you want an electric guitar, there's a lot of kind of standard between $100 and $200. By the way, don't get the cheapest guitar. Get one that you can afford that works right and sounds decent. And that's probably going to be around $200 would be my guess. Yes, you can get one for $100, and so you're going to compromise a lot. If it's under $200, be skeptical. You can find good used guitars for $100 that work great. It's a little tricky. I mean, obviously, you got to be able to tell if the guitar works right or not, and it really helps if you have a guitar buddy or if you're at the guitar shop where they have educated people that can tell you, here's the problems with the guitar, but yeah, it's a good deal, whatever. Okay, hope that helps, and I hope you get a wonderful guitar and have many years of enjoyment from it, Asia. Question, switching from bar chord to open chords can be a challenge. Yes. Bud is asking this question, and that's common, by the way, Bud. First is learning your basic chords. Second challenge is getting from basic chord to next basic chord. These are kind of humps in the guitar player path. Third basic challenge is playing a bar chord. And then actually the fourth challenge is not going from bar chord to bar chord, because a lot of times going from bar chord to bar chord is not that hard. You just move them around. easier than going completely switching your fingers to go from open to open chord. Once you get the bar chord, it's hard to play the bar chord, play the bar. But getting from bar to open, because again, not only are you switching all your fingers around, but you got to move that bar back and forth. First of all, there are some tips, but nothing is as powerful as methodical, regular practicing. And what really helps there is to have some specific exercises to practice, incorporate into your practice schedule, and do them a little bit every day. I will put a link in the show notes to some exercise to practice, along with some more tips to going from bar to open chord. But as far as a tip goes, one of the best ones to practice is going from the C chord to the F chord, because it's used so much. And a lot of what you learn will transfer. Here's the idea. Look to see what fingers stay the same and what fingers move, and practice the motion, even without strumming at first. So I've got a C chord here, and I'm going to go to my F. What I'm going to do is take the first finger off and just make a bar. That's the most important motion right there, and then go back. Practice that to where it feels easy, and then you got to see how it sounds. But before you do that, I'm going to add one more motion. See my second finger right here? I'm going to move that over one string, over in terms of the higher string, the third string from the fourth, and then the pinky comes down next to the third finger. So you can practice that motion separately. That's a C chord. Now practice going to this next chord. That's actually an F chord without the bar. If I play just the middle four, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 strings, that's F. If I hit that E, now it becomes a different chord, F major 7, but that's F. So I'm practicing this motion. See, I'm not strumming because it doesn't sound good. Then put the two together, down and bar. Back, fingers over, pinky up, bar back to the second string. So I've broken down the practicing into little steps, so it's not one big leap all at one time. Then, once you get this, you can start doing a similar exercise with another 2 chords. Try to look for a bar chord that you're using a lot, so you get a lot of bang for it. Plus, if you practice a lot, you're going to improve quicker. In other words, if you practice a bar chord you're hardly ever going to use, it's not going to be much fun, right? And it's going to take a while to practice it because you're not actually using it. Good question. Next, you're welcome, Asia. I'm glad that could help. Acoustic guitar, she says. Thank you, Pony Man. He likes my hat. Got this in San Francisco. By the way, it wasn't an arbitrary hat. I searched for the right hat for a while. I've had a few, and this is my favorite. Thanks so much. You're welcome, Alexandra. She's recommending the Yamaha SLG 200N. I don't upset the neighbors as I start to learn to play. Oh, that's not too loud, I'm guessing. I don't know that guitar, but I would take your word for it. I'd look it up on Amazon or something on the web and see what it looks like if I were interested. Question, Boxer 71. How long to get the muscle memory to play without watching every chord change? I've been playing a few months and still can't. Okay. Good question. As always, I want to make more of a lesson than just answer your question. Not the best question to ask. A lot of what will improve will be asking the right questions. Or the best questions. It's not a bad question. It's just not the best question. But I'll give you a hint. A couple of months is nothing. But it might be to you. And I get that. And that's part of what I mean by it's not the right question. You don't want to be calculating how good you're doing or when will I get there by time. I don't know, and it doesn't really matter. If you've been praying for a few months and you're practicing your chords once a week for 2 minutes, or if you're practicing every day for 6 hours. You see what I mean? A few months doesn't really tell me anything, and it shouldn't, because that's not what that's not what gets you progress. It's repetitions. What I can say is that you want to do as many repetitions as you can, as often as you can, balancing, your life, your lifestyle, and what you can tolerate. You're basically, practicing is failing constantly because you can't do it. If you could do it, you probably shouldn't be practicing it, right? So you're failing constantly. We all have a certain tolerance for that, and you get more tolerance as you progress. But you're going to calculate how good you get it by how many repetitions you do, preferably correct repetitions. Now, people make a big thing out of, if you do it wrong, you're memorizing it doing wrong. I'll say that's true, but keep in mind, you have to sometimes do it wrong to figure out how to do it right. So repetitions are more important than worrying about if it's correct or not. But over time, you want to make corrections. You want to do it consciously, not just, watch TV and not think about what you're doing, just do the same thing over and over and over. Watch and listen to what you're doing, see what you're getting. And is that the right sound? If not, make some small adjustments. Keep making small adjustments. And I will recommend you do it every day and try to do it for short periods of time, maybe several times a day if you can. What I'm trying to tell you is don't let too much time go between when you do it. The less time you do it, the faster the muscle memory will kick in. Number of repetitions, less time between repetitions. Forget about how long. You could be doing this for 20 years and still not getting it. You could be doing it for 1 week, a lot of reps a day, not too much time between, have it down cold, but, then find the next challenge, right? There's no end to this. Shouldn't be. That's what makes it fun. If I learned everything, I'd stop playing guitar. Right? The learning is part of the journey. So there'll be another hurdle and another hurdle. It's okay. Forget about how long. Are you practicing every day? Are you creating the habit of practicing? That's where to put your attention. Hope that helped. Boxer71. I like it when people tell me their name, but you'll have to be Boxer. Any more questions? I don't see any more. I'm going to go ahead and do the drawing for now. If you do have a last minute question, I will take one more look before I close up for today. And in the meantime, where's the drawing? I left it. Oh, Marco, Marco's, my dog's laying next here to me. No, we left the drawing somewhere. I'm sorry. I'll have to skip the drawing and I will do it off camera and notify the winner that you won. And you're going to get the drawing again for a $50 Amazon gift card. These are people who have entered my, are members of Real Guitar Success and have done at least 10 minutes of the practice session every day. By the way, the practice sessions are all around these different issues so that you have some practical things to practice. And we cycle through different areas of chords, finger style, exercises, theory. And every week I cycle through a variety of things, single line melodies, getting your fingers in the right place. And we keep coming back at it in different ways. And I give you the chance to save the ones that you like and your favorites and practice them again later. And just do 10 minutes on the ones you don't move you, just let them go. Thank you for being here. I don't see any more questions, but I see some very nice comments. Thank you, Alexandra, Ponyman, appreciate it. Hey, I look forward to seeing you again next month, first Thursday of the month, and we'll be back to answer more questions and do my best to keep you guys inspired and moving forward. Bye for now.